Let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone who seemed warm, kind, maybe even supportive on the surface, but deep down, something just felt off? They smiled, they nodded, they listened. But when you walked away, a quiet voice inside whispered, "Don't trust it." Now here's the truth. Not everyone who stands beside you is there to lift you up. And not every smile is genuine. But this isn't about fear. It's about awareness. Because there's a fine line between being open and being exposed. Between trusting wisely and trusting blindly. And when you've lived long enough, you start to realize some people don't destroy you by attacking. They do it by disarming you with charm, with compliments, with patience. The Stoics understood this better than most. They lived in a world full of shifting loyalties, political traps, betrayal from friends and family. And yet, they didn't choose paranoia. They chose presence. They chose to observe, to stay calm, and to trust their judgment over noise. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change. For truth is what I seek." That's the essence of Stoic wisdom, not to shut the world out, but to walk through it with clarity, with boundaries, with strength. Because let's be honest, you don't need to fear every person who walks into your life, but you do need to recognize the difference between someone who's genuinely on your side and someone who's slowly, silently working against you. And the tricky part? The people who want to harm you rarely announce it. They don't throw punches, they plant doubts. They don't storm through the door, they slip quietly through the cracks. So this video isn't about turning you into a skeptic. It's about making you more sovereign, to help you move through the world with your eyes open, your heart protected, and your peace intact. Because there's a certain kind of strength that doesn't need to be loud. A strength that comes from knowing you're not naive anymore, but also not bitter. You're just aware. And that awareness, when practiced without panic, becomes power. Power to say no without guilt. Power to notice red flags before they turn into regrets. Power to walk away, not because you're afraid, but because you're wise. This isn't just for people who've been betrayed or manipulated. This is for anyone who wants to sharpen their emotional radar, who wants to learn how to set healthier boundaries, and who understands that just because someone calls you friend doesn't mean they act like one. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to explore 6 subtle but clear signs that someone in your life may not have your best interest at heart. We're not here to judge. We're here to observe, to notice the patterns that too many of us overlook until it's too late. These signs won't always be obvious. They won't scream. They won't attack. They'll whisper. They'll wait. But once you learn to spot them, you'll start to feel something powerful shift inside you. Clarity, confidence, control. So before we dive in, I want you to remember this. You're not weak for trusting. You're not foolish for believing in others. But you are powerful when you learn to see clearly. When you learn to listen to that quiet voice in shown, the one that says, something's not right. Because in the end, it's not about pushing people away. It's about knowing who's earned a seat at your table and who hasn't. So if you're ready to build stronger boundaries, sharpen your instincts, and see people not through fear, but through wisdom, let's begin. 6 signs, 6 insights. 1 unshakable mindset. Stay aware, stay grounded, and never confuse kindness with blindness. Let's talk about betrayal, not the dramatic kind with slammed doors and screaming matches. I'm talking about the quiet kind, the kind that moves like smoke, that seeps in slowly. And by the time you notice it, you're already standing in the ruins of something you thought was solid. The most dangerous betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from those close enough to whisper. It starts small. A joke that doesn't quite land but somehow stings. A compliment that feels a little too calculated. A shift in someone's tone that you can't quite explain, but you feel it. And soon things around you start to change. People treat you differently, but no one can say why. You're not invited to things you used to be part of. Your ideas are dismissed more quickly, your efforts noticed less often. You wonder, did I do something wrong? You replay conversations in your head. You question your memory, your tone, your motives. But here's what you don't see at first. Someone has been slowly altering the way others see you. Not by lying outright, but by distorting the truth just enough to plant doubt. Maybe they frame your passion as aggression, your boundaries as coldness, your quiet moments as moodiness, and they never attack you directly because that would expose them. Instead, they let others draw their own conclusions. They drop hints, they raise eyebrows. They ask questions they already know the answer to, all to make others second guess who you really are. This is the quiet betrayal. It's not loud, it's strategic. And worst of all, you often don't realize it's happening until you've already been isolated. Here's a truth the Stoics understood deeply. If your self-worth depends on the opinions of others, you will always be at their mercy. Marcus Aurelius wrote this centuries ago, but it hits just as hard today. Because when someone's working behind the scenes to shift how others perceive you, you have two choices. You can chase down every rumor, try to clarify every misunderstanding, burn yourself out trying to fix how others see you, or you can anchor yourself in something deeper. Your integrity, your actions, your truth. Because here's the secret most people forget. You don't need to explain yourself to people who never bothered to understand you in the first place. And the people who truly know you, they don't need an explanation. They'll feel the shift too. They'll notice the inconsistencies. They'll remember who you were before someone tried to rewrite your story. Now, does that mean you stay silent while someone damages your reputation? Not necessarily, but it means you respond with intention, not panic. You keep showing up. You keep being who you are. And you let time do what it always does, reveal everything. The Stoics believed that character is stronger than gossip. And when you live in a way that aligns with your values, you build a kind of quiet proof that's stronger than any whisper campaign. So if you've noticed that subtle shift in how people treat you, if you feel like you've been quietly pushed to the edge of a room you used to stand at the center of, pause. Don't panic. Don't retaliate. And most importantly, don't become what they say you are. Stand firm. Speak with clarity when needed. But don't waste your breath on empty ears. Your job is not to convince. It's to be consistent. Because in a world full of smoke and shadows, the clearest light is always the one that doesn't flicker. And in time, the truth finds its way through. It always does. Let me ask you a simple question. Have you ever shared something personal, just a passing detail, and then later felt surprised by how quickly it spread? Or maybe someone brought it up again, but twisted? Or just a little too casually? You think, wait, did I ever tell them that? That's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition. Here's the truth. Not everyone who takes interest in your life is doing it out of care. Sometimes curiosity is just a mask for control. There's a particular type of person who always seems to know too much. They ask about your relationships, your routines, your future plans, your insecurities. And on the surface, it might look like empathy, like someone who genuinely wants to understand you better. But pay attention to the frequency, to the depth, to the timing. If every conversation leaves you feeling like you've given more than you meant to, if they remember every detail you've ever shared but you barely know anything about them, that's not balance. That's surveillance. Now, don't get me wrong, not everyone who asks questions is a threat. Human connection is built on curiosity. We ask to learn. We ask to care. That's normal. But what separates genuine interest from quiet manipulation is this: boundaries. A respectful person asks and backs off if you're not ready to share. They let the conversation breathe. But a manipulative person, they keep digging. They pivot back to you again and again, subtly steering the conversation until it's back in your vulnerable zone. And the most dangerous part? They don't always use what they learn right away. Sometimes they just collect. They build a mental database of your habits, your soft spots, your stress points. They remember where you go, who you're close to, what keeps you up at night, and when the time is right, if they want to influence you, control you, or undercut you, they already know where to strike. It's the emotional version of handing someone a blueprint to your house and then wondering how they knew exactly where the weak spots were. That's why the Stoics warned against overexposure. Not because they were antisocial, but because they understood how valuable privacy is to peace. Epictetus once said, "The more we reveal, the more we give others the power to use it against us." And in today's world, where oversharing is the norm, where we post our thoughts, our routines, our struggles for the world to see, that quote feels more relevant than ever. So what do you do? Do you shut down, cut everyone off, never open up again? Absolutely not. You don't need to isolate. You need to discern, because real connection isn't about giving away all of yourself. It's about sharing what's true with people who've earned your trust over time. You can still be open, still be warm, still be honest, but you can also be selective. You can ask yourself, why are they asking this? Do they need to know? Have they shared anything back? Or is this a one-way street? You can tell your story without handing over the keys to your inner world, because you don't owe anyone full access just because they seem nice. You deserve to feel safe in your own conversations, to protect parts of yourself that aren't ready to be shared, to hold space for your truth without letting someone else weaponize it. So if someone in your life seems overly invested in the fine print of your private life, and you leave those interactions feeling a little more drained, a little more exposed, a little more watched, that's not just a gut feeling. That's your instinct doing its job. Trust it, because being private isn't about hiding. It's about honoring what matters. And in a world that constantly pushes us to be seen, to be known, to be open, there's quiet power in knowing what to keep for yourself. Let me tell you something that most people overlook. Red flags rarely show up waving. Most of the time they whisper, they inch closer, and they test. That's how escalation works. It's never all at once, it's gradual. It starts with something small, so small, in fact, that you might laugh it off. A joke with a sharp edge, a playful nudge that lingers a bit too long, a comment that's just teasing but hits right where it hurts. And then it happens again, slightly bolder, slightly closer, And this time you hesitate. You wonder if you're overreacting. You tell yourself, maybe I'm being too sensitive. But here's what's really happening. You're being tested. People who push boundaries rarely kick down the door right away. They knock lightly, then wait. They want to see how far they can go without being stopped. And if you don't stop them, they take another step. This isn't always malicious in the beginning. Sometimes people don't even realize they're doing it. But the pattern is what matters. Because when someone makes you uncomfortable and you say nothing, they read that silence as permission. That's why it's so important to understand the quiet stages of escalation. Think about it like this. Let's say someone keeps making subtle comments about your appearance. Nothing too direct, just enough to make you question how to respond. The first time you smile awkwardly. The second time you brush it off. The third time it goes too far, and now it feels personal. By then, the damage is done, not because you're weak, but because the line was crossed so gradually that it became blurry. And this doesn't just happen in social circles. It happens in families, in workplaces, in romantic relationships, in any space where power can shift slowly without being noticed. This is how manipulation begins, not with control, but with comfort. They make you comfortable enough to let your guard down, then they see what they can get away with. That's why the Stoics taught not to avoid confrontation out of fear, but to recognize danger with clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Meaning when something feels off, that's not a reason to ignore it. That's your invitation to address it. And no, you don't have to be aggressive. You don't need to yell or accuse. But you do need to set the tone because if you don't define your boundaries, someone else will. So how do you deal with quiet escalation? Step 1. Spot it early. Don't gaslight yourself. If something feels off, give yourself permission to name it. Discomfort is a signal, not a flaw. Step 2. Set the boundary. It doesn't have to be loud. A calm, clear sentence like, "Hey, that crossed a line for me," is often enough to interrupt the pattern. Step 3. Watch what happens next. Someone who respects you will acknowledge it, maybe even apologize. Someone who doesn't, they'll deflect, mock, or push harder. And that tells you everything you need to know. You deserve to feel safe, to feel heard, to move through the world without shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. And you don't need anyone's permission to say, "That's not okay with me." So the next time you feel a slow push on your boundaries, don't wait until you're backed into a corner. Don't wait for the big moment, because quiet escalation doesn't need a loud ending. It just needs a clear line. Draw it early. Stand by it calmly. And remember, the strongest people don't build walls. They build clarity. And that, more than anything, is what keeps you free. Not every threat comes with a warning. Some threats watch. They wait. And they blend in so well you barely notice they're there until it's too late. Today, I want to talk about one of the most overlooked dangers in your life: the silent observer. They're not loud, they don't argue, they don't insult or criticize directly. Instead, they study you. They show up at places you go, seemingly by coincidence. They ask innocent questions through mutual friends. They react to things you never even told them because they have already been watching long enough to piece it together. And by the time you realize how much they know, you start to feel a little exposed. The silent observer doesn't need to hack your phone or follow you with a camera. All they need is patience and a network. Think about how easy it is in today's world. You might not post about your daily schedule, but your friends tag you. You don't talk much at work, but a coworker casually mentions your routines. You think you're private, but information about you leaks out in small drops until someone with the wrong intentions gathers enough to create a full picture of your life. And what do they do with that picture? They step into it quietly, strategically. They start showing up at your coffee shop. They switch gyms to coincidentally be at the same one you go to. They remember your preferences, your patterns, your people, and they never come off as threatening. They come off as familiar, harmless, friendly, but something inside you starts to tighten. Your gut tells you something doesn't feel right. You try to shake it off because there's no clear proof that anything's wrong. That's how silent observers operate, below the radar. They don't need confrontation. They prefer infiltration. And before you know it, they're woven into the background of your day-to-day life. So here's the question. Why would someone do this? Maybe it's control, maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's obsession, or maybe it's manipulation. The reason doesn't always matter as much as the pattern, because once someone starts tracking your life without consent, it's time to pay attention. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes incredibly powerful. The Stoics didn't teach us to panic. They taught us to observe, to stay composed, to stay sharp, especially when things seem off but aren't yet dangerous. Marcus Aurelius said, "Your mind will take the shape of what you frequently hold in thought." In other words, if you constantly ignore your instincts, you shape yourself into someone easy to manipulate. But if you train yourself to notice and respond with calm awareness, you become untouchable. So what do you do if you sense a silent observer in your life? Step one, Mossy, change your patterns. You don't have to live in fear, but you can live with intention. Try altering your routine. Take different routes. Show up at different times. When you become less predictable, you become less traceable. Step two, guard your privacy. You don't have to share every detail, even with people you trust. There's strength in keeping part of your life sacred, offline, and unknown. Step three, trust your gut. You don't need evidence to acknowledge unease. If someone's presence feels too convenient, question it, not with paranoia, but with presence. Because your instincts, they've evolved over thousands of years to detect danger long before your brain catches up. Trust that signal. And finally, remember, you don't owe anyone full access to your life. Being friendly does not mean being open. Being kind does not mean being available. And being watched does not mean you have to play along. So if you've started to notice someone who's always just there, who knows too much too easily, don't ignore it. Silence is not harmless. Sometimes silence is strategy. Stay private, stay intentional, and stay just out of reach. Let's be honest. Some of the most painful betrayals don't come from enemies. They come from people who called themselves your friend, people who smiled, supported you, stood beside you, and slowly, quietly used that closeness against you. This is the danger of the false friend. They come in fast, warm, curious, generous with their time and attention. They ask how you're doing, what you're working on, what you dream about. And at first it feels amazing, like someone finally gets you. They make you feel seen, safe, valued. But real friendship, it takes time. It takes seasons. It's built, not rushed. And when someone tries to skip that process, when they go from stranger to soulmate in a matter of weeks, you need to pause. Because sometimes speed is a strategy. A false friend doesn't want connection. They want access, access to your story, your struggles, your secrets, not to support you, but to store that information for later. At first, they cheer you on. They echo your ideas. They build trust. But then something shifts. A private detail you shared shows up in a conversation it was never meant to be in. A project you started somehow becomes their success. They repeat your worries back to you, but with a twist that makes you doubt yourself. And when you bring it up, they gaslight. You're overthinking it. I'd never do that to you. I was just trying to help. But you feel it in the tone, in the timing, in the way your boundaries start to feel blurry. You gave trust. They used it. Now here's the hard truth. This doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. We're wired for connection. We want to believe people mean well. We want to be open, generous, kind. But here's the Stoic wisdom that saves you from being hurt twice. Time reveals all things. Real friendship doesn't need to be proven in the first week. It proves itself when you're not around, when you're not useful, when you have nothing to offer but your presence. Seneca once wrote, "Associate with those who make you better." That means not the ones who flatter you, not the ones who push for intimacy too soon, but the ones whose presence brings peace, whose actions match their words, whose loyalty is quiet, not performative. So how do you spot a false friend? Start with pace. If someone is suddenly everywhere, texting constantly, wanting to know every part of your life, inserting themselves into your routine, ask yourself why. Are they interested in you or in knowing everything about you? Next, watch for consistency. Do their words align with their behavior? Are they reliable when you're not at your best? Or do they only show up when there's something to gain? And finally, protect your emotional passwords. You don't have to live guarded, but you can live wisely. Share slowly. Let people earn their way into your life through time, through trust, through shared experience. Because once a false friend gets close, they don't need to stab you in the back. They're already standing beside you, and they know exactly where to strike. So if someone in your life feels too eager, too fast, if you start to feel like they know too much too soon, don't shame yourself for opening up. Just listen to what time is showing you. And remember, real friendship doesn't ask to be fast. It asks to be proven. Let it. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling smaller, but you couldn't quite explain why? Nothing was said that was blatantly hurtful. There was no shouting, no direct insult. And yet, you still found yourself thinking, did I overreact? Was that my fault? Maybe I'm just being too sensitive. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not wrong to feel that way. This is the sixth sign we need to talk about. The person who makes you doubt yourself. They don't come at you with attacks. They come with questions, with tone, with subtle comments that poke holes in your confidence, quietly, consistently. They twist your words. They forget important things you said. They call your reactions dramatic or confusing. And before you know it, you start editing yourself around them. You shrink your emotions. You double check everything you say. You second guess your own gut. And that's exactly what they want. Because here's the truth about manipulation. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers until your inner voice no longer sounds like your own. This kind of behavior shows up most often in relationships that are supposed to feel safe. A romantic partner, a close friend, a basis, even a parent. They'll phrase things as concern. I just don't think that really happened the way you remember it. Or empathy, I know you're sensitive, so I didn't want to upset you. But make no mistake, these are not casual comments, they're quiet control. Because every time you doubt your memory, your judgment, your worth, they gain a little more power. And eventually you find yourself asking questions you never used to ask. Was I too much? Am I too emotional? Do I even know what I'm talking about anymore? The Stoics had a word for this kind of erosion: fragmentation, when you allow your core to be chipped away by external forces. But here's what they taught that's just as important. You always have the power to return to yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." So ask yourself this: whose colors are staining your thoughts? If being around someone constantly makes you feel unsure, unworthy, unsteady, it's not because you are broken. It's because their presence is reshaping your identity in ways that aren't healthy. So what can you do? First, get quiet. Not with them, with yourself. Start noticing how you feel before, during, and after interactions with this person. Does your body feel tight? Do you leave the conversation feeling confused or ashamed? That's not just in your head, that's information. Second, trust your emotions. You don't need a list of receipts to know something feels off. Your discomfort is enough. Third, name it. This doesn't mean confrontation or blame. It means acknowledging the pattern to yourself first, because clarity is the first step to reclaiming confidence. And finally, rebuild. Rebuild your sense of truth slowly and gently. Surround yourself with people who remind you who you are, not who they want you to be. Because someone who constantly chips away at your self-belief is not helping you grow. They're keeping you small so they can stay comfortable. And you deserve more than that. You deserve relationships that feel like safety, not survival. So if someone in your life consistently makes you question your worth, your memory, your instincts, don't ignore it. Don't dismiss it. Don't explain it away. That discomfort, that little voice saying, "This doesn't feel right," it's not weakness, it's wisdom. Listen to it. And remember, a person who truly loves you, who truly values you, won't make you feel like you have to doubt yourself just to stay close to them. So here's the truth. Not everyone who enters your life has bad intentions. Not every warm smile hides a threat. And not every misstep in a relationship means betrayal. But when you understand the signs we've explored today, you give yourself something powerful: choice. The choice to stay calm instead of constantly doubting. The choice to observe rather than overreact. The choice to protect your energy without closing your heart. This isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming clear. Because Stoicism was never about distrusting people. It was about understanding human nature without illusions and learning to navigate relationships with both strength and compassion. Seneca didn't tell us to build walls, he told us to build wisdom. And Marcus Aurelius didn't say, "Don't let people in." He said, "Don't let them disturb your peace." There's a difference. You don't have to shut the world out. You just need to know who truly belongs in your world and who doesn't. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all, that you don't need to be suspicious of everyone. You don't need to live in fear. You just need to be awake, discerning, and grounded in your worth. Because when you know your value, it becomes much harder for others to exploit it. When you trust your instincts, manipulation loses its grip. And when you stop chasing approval, you start attracting alignment. So if you're someone who's been hurt before, if you've opened your heart to the wrong people, if you've ever wondered, how did I not see it sooner? Forgive yourself. You weren't blind. You were brave. You were trying to connect. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. But now you know more. You see more and you can choose better. Because the goal isn't to be guarded, it's to be wise. It's to offer trust slowly, to share intentionally, to connect with clarity. And the more you live from that place of centered strength, the more naturally you begin to attract people who match that energy. Not those who take advantage of your light, but those who protect it. So let me leave you with this. You don't need to be perfect to be powerful. You just need to stay awake. You are not here to be used. You are here to grow, to connect, and to thrive with people who truly see you. And if this message spoke to something in you, if even one part of today's video made you pause, reflect, or feel understood, then take a moment to share it with someone who might need it too. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel because we're building something deeper here, a space where Stoic wisdom meets real-life challenges, where your clarity becomes your power, and where each lesson brings you closer to the strong, steady, unshakable version of yourself you've always been becoming. Thanks for watching, and remember, you don't have to fear people. You just have to know yourself. We'll see you in the next video.